I'm going to show you a bunch of valid trade setups that you could have taken today on the ES 2000 tick chart, day trading the futures contracts. And these are all high probability setups that you could have taken. I'm going to show you step by step the strategy that I use to find these setups every day and how this would have worked. So let's get into it here. So you can see this was a really difficult trading day. You can see we had this big range in play, really wild price action, different trends in between. And basically, what ended up happening was we just had a sporadic day after hitting an all time high yesterday. This purple line is the all time high. And this dotted line over here is where we opened this morning. And there was a gap on the chart here, this dotted brown line that goes across the screen that we didn't fill till later in the session. It took until about 9 a.m. my time. So it was a couple hours, 2.5 hours or so into the session before it finally filled that gap. And after it did, it went up. It tried to reach for the all-time high, and it rejected off of pretty much the overnight highs. And really, it rejected off of right here, which was the CPI high that happened in the pre-market. It didn't even quite make it back there. So you can see that is pretty much what happened. I'm going to go through the trades now. I'll turn off my camera so that I don't get in the way of anything, and I'll zoom in. All right. So let's start over here. This morning you had to be careful because we had this giant candle because of the CPI data release. So you couldn't trade that. You needed to stay out of that. And basically we had this high. So at the time I had my range, didn't have my range drawn all the way down here. Actually what I did initially was I dragged my range from yesterday and it worked pretty well for a little while. And then eventually I realized, okay, we have a different range on our hands. So I stopped that range and I brought this down. And that's one thing I like to do. I like to keep all my drawings from the day prior on the chart. Scroll back and you can see them. And it kind of gives me some reference points. So I did earlier on think that we might have a down channel in play that was sort of like this. And I had it originally drawn here. And then as it went lower, I thought maybe we have a big wide down channel. And it kind of worked, but it didn't really confirm anywhere. You know, you had some touches here and here, but you didn't really confirm when you came up to the top side, and over here just blasted straight through and didn't make a new low. So that I knew that it was probably more of a range day. I was following the short-term trend lines. So basically, after the CPI release, we had this down channel working. And finally, we get a break here, and we have this up channel working. Up channel breaks, and we end up getting a new high on the up channel. We don't actually get a new low on the down channel till way over here, which happened after the open. So that was at 6:49 or so, my time, which is Pacific time. So about 20 minutes after the open, we finally made our new low on this down channel. So after this uptrend, we made the short-term uptrend. We had two swings. So we had a new high and then another swing to a new high. But you couldn't really short anything. You were kind of in no man's land. At a certain point, I had my range high. I had a secondary range drawn. Eventually, I had to move it. Now, one thing that did happen today was I had to close my chart at some point and then open it back up. And so some of my candles actually changed a little bit. So I just want to call that out, that if you were following any of my screenshots earlier that I post for free in Discord and also in the community, you'll see that like I had these, it just looked a little different than after I reloaded my chart. So that's just something I wanted to call out. All right, so the first trade of the day for me was right here. This was right after the open, 9 minutes after the open. Basically, what you had, you already made your new high, you had your two swings. So now what you really have here is a pullback first entry, pullback second entry, pullback third entry. But this one right here is not really that convincing of a swing. It's kind of congestion. So to me, it kind of looks like first entry, second entry long. Or if you kind of considered this almost like a double top, you could see it as a first entry, second entry long. And really, it's just a failed break lower. You could kind of see this as kind of like you came down to this area here, then you tested it here, here, kind of like a triple test, not quite making the new low yet. So I marked it green because you're still expecting a new low on here, and this could be the push down. And you don't end up getting it, but you do get this kind of bullish candle. And originally, this was even a more bullish candle. It closed up here where the arrow is. So it was very bullish, and I would have thought, all right, we're probably going back to the EMA, which we did. All right, so then we finally do get our breakdown here. I drew this channel, but this is just the correction channel, so you're not really expecting a new low on that, because it's really just the new low from this channel. So I just drew it though to stay out of any longs in case, but if there was a setup where maybe it closed outside, gives us a nice entry for a failed break lower, it might be a possibility. I had my bigger range lows down here, but you end up not really getting anything there. Unfortunately, you don't really get an entry. You could argue now at the time, I'm going to draw this on here. There is a higher low right here. So it breaks out and then it comes up, it gives you this bullish higher low that's back within this range. So, and even if you had your range drawn a little lower, it's still back within the range. So that's actually a pretty decent one. But at the time when I was trading, my chart looked different and it didn't actually present as a higher low. It presented as, there wasn't a low there. So anyway, I'm going to draw it here just in case your chart looked more like this. There's also another possible trade setup that wasn't there earlier that I'm going to draw on here, which is going to be, it would be a blue arrow, but again, my chart looked different earlier. And so this would be a first entry, second entry failure. Right above this bar, you have a failed second entry short because you have a 1, 2, boom. And you could take that right in, and that's back within the actual range that we had above here. So that's a nice one closing above the EMA. You're expecting it to kind of rocket back up towards the range highs at this point. Probably maybe go towards these highs, maybe go to fill this gap up here. So that would have been a nice one. But again, it looked different when I was trading this earlier. And after I reloaded my chart, the data had kind of changed a bit. So that's why it wasn't on the earlier screenshots. But I'll draw it there now just because. Okay, and some of my trends, because of the way that the data reloaded, some of my trend lines moved very slightly compared to where they were. So like earlier, this one was a little lower off of this close. But again, because of the way that the data went, it kind of screwed things up. So I apologize. All right, so then it came up here. We had this trend, it broke. Now we had 1, 2, second entry, but no real entry bar there. Comes up to here. You end up coming down here. You get this kind of higher low, but it's a very strange setup. It doesn't really qualify. And then eventually does make the new high from this channel. But you had this up channel working. Now, again, it all moved. It would have probably been more like something like that. I don't know. It all moved on me. So whatever. I'm just going to leave it kind of where it is. And you had this up channel that finally does get a break. And this is a bigger up channel. So you are expecting eventually you're going to get a high, probably to close the gap. You don't know when it's going to happen, but when you have the wider channel, it's something you got to have your eye on. So then what happens is we have this down channel working. So we have this high and then here. Now what I had here, again, this all moved on me. Very frustrating, but whatever. So I'm going to draw it like that just to make it look more accurate to this way the data reloaded. But basically what you had here was you had a swing down, first entry, swing down, second entry long that kind of looks like a failure, but it doesn't break below. So it's a second entry long that actually continues, and it looked like it would have been a trap, but it actually doesn't break below that. So you don't end up with a second entry that fails, which really it would have failed below this. So it's a first entry, second entry long that ends up pushing up, but it goes to here. And what this looks like to me is from the low, you have a first entry comes up, second entry short. What it also looked like to me was a failure of the higher low on the second entry long. So this is a more advanced trade, and this one in real time for me was an engulfing bar that closed all the way on its low. So it was looking like it was going to be a really nice one where then you could just ride it down and it would have been a nice scalp short. So what this is, again, is a first entry, second entry long that goes to here, pullback, higher low that fails at one tick into a short. That's also qualifying as a second entry short. So more advanced. This was green originally because of how it loaded on my chart. On this chart now, this is actually a red. This is a safe trade here. All right, so then we come down. Um, Again, we finally break out. We break out of this down channel, which this down channel was more confirmed on my other chart. I had a close up here somewhere before it reloaded. You get a break outside. You're expecting a new low of this channel. You're in this range. You still are expecting the new high eventually. And so what you end up getting here is you get a close outside. And for me, what you have is you have a first entry, second entry short there, and this is a lower high on the second entry short because it's a low here, first entry, second entry after the break comes down a little bit, comes up and gives you a lower high. And then that's a decent lower high on the second entry short to bring you to just expecting a new low here. And so that one ends up being a pretty safe trade. Again, this was green because on my original chart, this bar was a little bit, had a little bit more green in it. It wasn't actually a red bar. On this chart, this would actually qualify again as a red arrow here. So unfortunately, it's annoying, but this is what happened today. All right, so then what you also get here, so you get the low there, but you haven't made a new low yet. So that's interesting. What you end up with is another trap. And again, this one I'm going to mark it as red now because it was green earlier because again, it was a more green bar originally, but what you get here is a first entry, second entry long failure. Boom, that's going to go down to finally give you that new low. It's another trap for all these longs that are trying to aggressively think that they're going to get the uptrend here, but you're in the range. So you got to play these rules. Hey, we're expecting tap back to the range. We failed out of the upside back into the range. We had a failed breakout. Um, I didn't actually mark this on here. There's a lower high here on this that, you break back into the range, failed breakout. That kind of is like a first entry. I don't know. I'm not going to mark it because the bars changed, but anyway, sorry, I'm going to skip that. So we're going to go down here. I didn't like some of the congestion there after the doji, so that's another reason, but just right now, that bar looks a little bit more tempting, but this doji kind of screws everything up with that congestion. All right, so we come down in this downtrend, and now we have this downtrend working. Now, again, this might just be a correction of this, but you still do get a new low after the break, so that's nice. So you get this downtrend, you hit the bottom of the range. Now, at the time, you don't really know if this really is the bottom of this range. You broke out of it here a couple of times. So you're kind of thinking maybe this is the bigger range in play, which I did have in there. But what ends up happening is we bounce off of this range low, come up, and what you get here is a first attempt lower. It kind of comes up and gives you sort of a hidden second entry short. But you don't. There's no way to enter that. So anyway, you get your break, comes down, comes up. It's kind of like two swings to a new low because it's a break, pulls down, then it comes back up, and then it comes down again. So it's sort of like two swings to a new low. But then you finally do make this low here, and I marked this one as a green as a possible enter on the engulfing bar, and the reason for that is that you've bounced here several times. There, there, and there. Now, again, you did break out below here, but that's because you had this downtrend in play. And you're still thinking you're probably going to test these highs up here, and you still have this gap above you. So this is one that I thought was a little riskier, but you could have probably entered this on the engulfing bar because you did make your new low all at once here. You broke out, you made your new low, and then you had this really kind of bullish momentum that was starting. And in some ways, you'd see this as there's a couple reasons to like that one. So I just marked it. It looked a little different on my chart earlier. So then you had this uptrend working. Finally, you get a break. Now on this one, on my chart earlier, this break was actually a close outside and new high and break all at the same time. So this candle actually had a like one tick higher than this one. It looked different on my chart earlier. So you already got your new high there. And what you end up with here that I liked was you then came up and you got this sort of lower high, but it's also a second entry short. So it's a lower high back at the top of the range to break back in, like a failed breakout again. And it was a second entry short because you have this new low and you had a first entry pullback, second entry short. So that was a really nice one. Probably one of the better trades today based on how difficult some of this day was. Then from over here, you also see right as that makes its low there, you know that we still are looking for the new high. We didn't get it there. We're close. But we're thinking we still need the new high from this, and we need to fill that gap. So what we end up with is actually a first entry, second entry long, closes above the EMA. And real on my chart earlier, this was more bullish of a close. It wasn't as much of a doji like that. It was actually more of a green bar. And so for me, that was just a way to scalp back up to the range high and was a pretty safe setup for me on the second entry long, expecting a new high of this trend over here. So I marked that one. Gives you a higher low here, but you can't enter that. Too big of a bar, too much stem on top. and whatnot. Another higher low here, but you don't know what this is really going to do here. It's a doji. So now I had this trend drawn off of this close, and I'm thinking, okay, we have an up channel working. We touched it here, we closed on it there, tapped it. That's the low. Tapped it basically right there, and we're starting to break out. We start running up. We come all the way up. We fill the gap. And then we actually come up to this area, which is just slightly higher than the overnight high. Not quite to the CPI, but decent setup. And then this comes down. You don't really get a way to enter anything short here. You're still in this uptrend. You don't get any sort of lower high. There's no break anyway. So I saw this as now we came down and broke it here. You get a lower high there that rejects, but you're not really expecting it yet because you're thinking maybe we're going to get a first entry, second entry long that makes a new high, but it doesn't happen. What ends up happening is first entry long, and then you get this pullback, second entry long, no signal bar, even though it would have worked, but you can't enter that, even though it's a double bar matching low there. I don't like entering on those most of the time. Can't entering on the engulfing bar either. So nothing really there. And then it actually just rejects. And now you have this down channel drawn. So you have some closes that you can draw. So actually I drew this originally off this close. I eventually made it wider because it fit a little bit better as we came down. And so what I ended up with, this thing moved on me a little bit. I drew it eventually more like this because I had it originally like this, and then there's a break there, which I guess either way kind of works. Maybe that is actually more valid now that I'm looking at this in real time. So now that this is actually played out more, you could actually have it more drawn like this. I don't know why this thing keeps moving on. So anyway, off of that close, you could draw it this way, and then what you end up with is you come down, you have this slight up channel working, but from here, you have this low, and you have a first entry. It breaks out of the channel here and hits the EMA, and it gives you a second entry short below this red bar. Now, I don't love this one because it's a 2-bar matching high there. Now, if this thing had closed one tick higher, this would have been beautiful because then this up channel would have had a close outside all in one bar with a second entry short. Because you got that 2-bar matching high, it's not ideal because really this slight up channel could get a new high still before it goes lower. So I don't love that because this is the first close outside. So if it would have ticked one tick higher and then came down like this, it would have been beautiful. But it's still a very bearish bar, and you are expecting that this downtrend is in play. And at the time, again, I was considering that this might actually be a wider channel that looks like that, and we're closing within it from the channel high, coming down in this move. But in any case, it doesn't really matter. This gets you to the same place because this would still be a close outside, expecting a new low on this wider down channel. So either way, that works. And you end up not getting the new low. It just comes down to here. So that trade would have worked. It does gap over. It's hard to probably get into that trade. So it's green anyway. What you end up getting, though, is you get a lower high over here that traps everybody. Now, what I love about this lower high is this. It comes down, and it starts to come up, and it looks like you're going to get the lower high here. And originally in real time, I actually had my stop order one tick below this bar. So I had a stop short order. I did take this trade right before I started recording the video. So I had this, my order sitting right here. And I'm thinking, okay, we're probably going to hit this order. And then I'm going to just rocket this thing down to the new low of this channel. I'm probably going to take it to this yellow, to the where we opened the day. So I'm thinking, all right, this is going to look like a decent trade setup. But what ends up actually happening is it doesn't fill me. This next bar opens and it just pushes all the way up. It traps a bunch of longs above the EMA. And at this point, I actually canceled my order because I'm like, it looked pretty bullish. And I thought that this was going to be invalid. And then the bar comes all the way down. And right when it was about to close, I was like, okay, perfect. I waited for the bar to close. I dropped my stop order right there. And then it immediately filled me. It bounced around here for just a second. And then it shot down and gave me a nice trade setup. So this was a really cool lower high setup because it's almost like a trapped longs right there. The one tick stopped a bunch of longs who thought they were going to go for the new high or something there from that up channel. So anyway, I liked it. And even if you did have this drawn wider, either way, this still gets you to the same conclusion of staying in a short here because it's still closing below and it's valid. It looks valid to me the way this thing closed. So it is possible that this was the down channel and this is the first break of it. It is possible, but it's a hard one to say. Only time will tell how the price action plays out because like this isn't that convincing of a close. The thing is, when we get a close outside, it usually looks like a more convincing close if like the next swing makes the high and then it comes down to make the low. When it's like making still lower highs like this, a lot of times to me it means that it might be a wider channel that was still in play. Because what you're seeing here is like this. If this was the channel and it was like this, then you see what I'm saying here. It breaks out and now it's making a new high, and then maybe this thing reverses and makes a new low. But anyway, just want to call it out. So I'm gonna leave it like this as a possible channel that looks like that. And then this thing rode you down to the new low. Now you got your new low. You end up not coming all the way down to the bottom of the range here. But if you zoom out, this is a pretty consistent low bounce kind of area. And so you end up bouncing somewhere down here. There's really no setup here. I didn't draw this because I had already started the video, but basically you might have had from kind of like down here. That's not perfect, but whatever. Something like, it looks like you got some sort of a possible up channel working, maybe something like that. Kind of fits right here off of those and fits off this close. So it might be something like this. Again, it's possible this thing is a little wider, but that looks pretty good to me right now. And it's now finding some possible resistance here at these highs. So we'll have to see what this thing ends up doing. It wouldn't surprise me if this thing comes up. The all-time high is this purple up here. It could try to come up towards that. It could creep up towards these range highs, give you another tap of those. It could try to tap some of this area. Really hard to say how this thing is going to play out at this point. You've got this uptrend working, so you got to respect that short-term uptrend. Again, this downtrend could have played out and that could have already been the new low. Or, like I said earlier, this could have still be in play to where you've actually got this wider channel, which does fit nice, and this is your break of it. So in that case, you might still be expecting a new low from this, but you are still expecting a new high from this up channel from earlier. You didn't get that. Now, earlier when we had this wide channel, it took a while to do it. So this could be the attempt. This could be going for that level, and it wouldn't surprise me if it plays out that way. I'm actually going to leave this channel on just so that I can see tomorrow how it ended up playing out. Because I like, or even just later today, I'll log back in and check because I just like to see that. And that's pretty much all I got for you. There were some good trade setups today. You did have to be patient. There's a lot of greens earlier on. Now I changed them to reds because of how my chart reloaded, and this one again wasn't even on there earlier. These two trades, but it was overall a good day. I will say that earlier today, I didn't get my trades till later in the day. Like I ended up starting to take trades later on because earlier today they were all greens for me, the way that my chart looked. Now, of course, after the fact, they look better because of how it reloaded, but that's just not what it was in real time. So you got to keep that stuff in mind when you're trading and when you're looking at this. And if you look at my earlier screenshots, you'll see why when you go and look at those. But again, for me, you just have to be careful on a day like today. It was a really hard day to start. Like there wasn't really much setups. Again, these ones weren't even here. So you really just had this long, and then you had to wait all the way till over here for your first kind of shorts. And they were all greens at the time. So these ones were the nice ones when it came in. And when I came back to the chart later on, there was some nice trades. I think over here, this one was a really nice one later on that I got. So again, there were some good trades later on. Off of this, I'm not seeing much setting up here. Looks like there's a higher low right here after this low. And again, but it's below the EMA. And, that one is a difficult one. Again, if you were playing it as this was already the break and the new low, this might have been a higher low. But you don't know if this trend was actually still the trend and this is your first time breaking out of it. You're below the EMA. Just not ideal. Still right in the middle of that range. Just not a perfect place to go long. Let's see how this plays out here. So we've got this low, second entry short there, which is actually pretty decent, but Not really a setup. You're still within that short-term trend. Finally, you're breaking out here. So this could end up being a close outside and a new high all at the same time, which these ones tend to be can be kind of aggressive, where this might end up. So if this closed outside really bearish, then this thing will probably be, then basically the uptrend played out is how that works. Now it depends on where it closes, because if you draw this and this was wider, this could be a factor if it ends up being something like this. So you got to wait and see where it actually closes here. But if this closes down on its low here, that's going to be pretty bearish looking. And then this will become a possible trade. It will be a green because it's a close outside, new high all at once. And you're really close to the EMA. You're really close to these range highs. You could end up tapping it and bouncing. So it's not a perfect setup. Wouldn't even be a trade that I would take. But I'm just going to put the arrow there just so we can watch it for a second just to see. Yeah, so this is probably going to close more like a doji. Um, I mean, that's bearish, but not good enough for me because if you drag this thing down, it's barely outside. So that would be the close outside, a new high all at once. So what you'd be looking for here is maybe it swings up and makes another high, or it gives you a lower high, nice type of entry. But you don't really have anything to go off of here. So not really any trade set up for me right now. It looks like it's pretty much just going to be sideways action, and I'm going to stay out of that. But just wanted to share what I saw for the day. Hope that you have a good rest of the trading day. Be careful as the day progresses. You know, it's kind of been getting crazy late in the day, so just be careful with that. And I'll see you next time.